know we all know what happened after. I know we all know what has happened.
What are you talking about? The season ended right there. Season ended there. Nothing's happening anymore. We all dreamed it. We obviously did a debrief of sorts after the March Madness ending, which we called March Sadness, which was not good. And
it's continued to be sad too.
Just leave that over there. So we can, rehash that a little bit, but I want to talk about it in its full view now, kind of putting basketball to bed, especially men's basketball, since we've talked about it so much almost every week for the last several weeks. And the way I think we could do it, Austin, is just kind of take a walk through the major components of the season, what we remember, whether that be obviously anything in preseason, non-conference, SEC, and then postseason opportunities. So I guess let me pitch that to you. You think about this team, if you can take yourself back to that point, which is hard to do considering everything that happened. What were you thinking? What were you hoping for? What were you worried about? Just what, if you can take yourself back to that time before the season starts, what was all on your mind then?
That's a great question, and feels like a very long time ago.
I think far away.
I think that I was a bit concerned about guard play and how Aiden Holloway would blend and learn the college game quickly. I think we were pretty encouraged early on, and so I think that that was, the biggest component I was concerned about. I was incredibly excited Janai Broom was back.
Yeah.
There was a handful of transfers that we had very high hopes for, and throughout the course of the year, throughout the long year, ended up showing bright spots. Denver Jones, Chaney Johnson, Chad Baker-Mazara. And so I think that I was nervous of how all those cogs would fit together to make the wheel turn. But this coaching staff has shown they know how to do that. And it ended up, working really well.
Yeah.
Sure. I think you can ask for better guard play at times. The speed of the game to come to different players quicker. But it's human beings playing a sport. And so I think that those things are just natural with anything. But I think those were my biggest concerns going into it. Didn't take long to kind of not be as worried about those, but there was a lot of new faces coming in.
Yeah, definitely a lot of new faces. And I feel like there was less hype leading into the season for a variety of reasons. I think we didn't have a tip-off at Toomers. We did have open practices, a couple of them that kind of gave you to replace that. You had a lot of transition in terms of coaches and players leaving.
That's true.
And coming in. And then obviously with the newness of Coach Hugh Freeze coming in for football, there's a lot of attention, maybe even more so because the season before that was terrible. Well, maybe they both were. But anyway, there was at least excitement about football, the newness of what was going on there. So I think all that combined took a little bit of the pressure and tension off this team.
Agreed.
And then when you couple in the questions about how is all these new pieces going to work together and can it work together really fast to put something special together? Like you said, it was kind of hard to pinpoint what we could expect out of this. I will tell you, though, as the season began and I watched the first game versus Baylor, again, it was first game. It's at a neutral site. And I watched that team play together. I said, I'm fighting real hard to not get excited about this team. And if you'll go back and watch live stream shows, you'll see me really trying to not only talk to you all, the viewers, the listeners, but myself. Like it was like self-therapy in a sense. Do not do this to yourself. Do not believe this team
very early
is as good as you feel like they are. But every time we move to that non-conference play outside of a handful of two situations, Baylor and App State. Am I correct on that, right? That was
That's right. Yeah.
And that App State loss, I still maintain, is not a bad loss. And Baylor certainly isn't. I walked away from non-conference play telling folks this is an Elite 8 team. I know. We now know in hindsight. Slow down. But you think back about non-conference. Anything else stuck out to you that as we went through that?
No, I think we saw really early on how this team was going to play in terms of minute sharing and how it was going to be a selfless team. Lots of different rotations, lots of different configurements of who's on the court at what time. I think we all knew very early on Janai Broom was going to be every bit of the pro that he looks like he's going to be. We all knew that Trey Donaldson had taken another step forward.
Yep.
In his point guard play, and Jalen Williams was going to be the Jalen Williams that we knew he has had the potential to be his 5 years. I don't even know.
Well,
It feels like a bunch.
I think it's 5, but it feels like 6, and I would have loved for it to have been a 7th somehow. Just I think for me, that's what began to make this year clearly it was going to be it's special. And when you talk about the full view, not how it ended, but the full view was the story of Jalen Williams realizing the potential we all saw that was there and becoming this dominant player alongside Janai. I mean, there was a stretch, folks, where Janai was almost taking a back seat to how well Jalen was playing.
That's right.
And it started in non-conference play. It's just like this light went off. And I think his biggest, not issue, but drawback was maybe not being more aggressive and confident in himself. And when that light went off, we just saw this brilliant player that we all knew was there. And we saw at times. That to me, I think is probably the biggest story for me personally coming out of non-conference play.
Yeah.
Anything else stuck out to you about non-conference or?
No, I'll be honest, and this can kind of move us into conference play. I had higher hopes, talking about just in non-conference, for Chaney Johnson and Chad Baker-Mazara. I thought that the potential was there. It was very obvious. They are athletic, raw specimens that can make differences for Auburn on the basketball court, but it just was not coming together as quickly as I think a lot of people have hoped. I think even the coaching staff hoped. But as we move into conference play, it was like you would expect that to be like, all right, if you're not there by then, hey, the SEC is a gauntlet. It's going to be next year for you. But those guys stepped up down the stretch.
Yeah, it's kind of like
massively.
Kind of piggyback on what you're saying. It's kind of like we saw with Juwan Traore. Like it didn't come along, and so when you saw SEC play come around, his numbers dipped. So just to kind of give you a little support for that.
No, yeah, you're right. And so thankfully that had the opposite effect. And now we look at both of those guys ahead of next year, and it has that same excitement of similar to Jalen and Janai, that we're like, these guys are going to be some building blocks for us to go into next year that we're confident about.
Yeah.
So the development of those guys all year long was really special. I think that as we went through SEC play, I was more and more impressed with the way they could handle the basketball, especially in a league like the SEC.
You saw with the conference play a good start, and then you ran into some road troubles against a team that's doing well, and a few other places. Mississippi State, Florida is probably the lowest point of the full scope of the season because just walked in there and didn't even look like we wanted to be there. But if that's your low point, you saw this even with a few more losses that come along in the gauntlet of the SEC this year. I don't even know why we say that at this point, because every sport is a gauntlet when it comes to the SEC, and it's typically the best conference in the sport that we're talking about. But you saw this team slowly become even more cohesive as minutes got further figured out. Some injuries came along. Janai, he came back. Lior, we lost him for the rest of the season. And you thought, okay, well, we had some momentum. These things are kind of hurting that momentum. Are we going to be able to sustain this thing through? And we finished out strong in the conference play and then roll into this tournament. And I think you and I, we're only a few weeks removed from this. We said we thought Auburn would make it to the championship game and lose to Kentucky.
Right.
But I think, we probably had a little bit just of the hype going with us too. This is a team in the SEC that could have faltered, but what a way to end your season, begin your postseason with another conference title under Bruce Turtle. Bruce Turtle. Bruce Turtle. That one's clip that one right there. Bruce. Me. That's definitely an awkward turtle right now. Bruce Pearl winning a conference tournament title. That was just, God, that was so sweet.
Auburn, Nashville, Auburn North showed up, and it was an incredible 3 days. Yes,
3 days.
3 days for Auburn. Right. Played well. and ended up cutting down nets in Nashville. And so nothing to be, I know we all know what happened after. I know we all know what has happened.
What are you talking
the
about? The
weeks
season
since.
ended right there. Season ended there. Nothing's happening anymore. We all dreamed it.
But it's good. It's not a feat that needs to be diminished. And I know there's gonna be people, I'm sure, that find this replay and they're like, oh, there they go. Little brother syndrome. But look, like, that is a banner that will hang in Neville Arena, and rightfully so should, because this team won a championship and they played like it.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible showing. That I think that Florida game was one that I was like, I got to see in person, and it was one where I was like, this team plays well together and loves to play with each other. And it was kind of the culmination of how the season had gone. So
right.
I'm really, really glad and proud that this team did get to cut down nets, no matter where it was, but that claimed SEC championship.
Yeah, very special way to reward this team for what they became this season. And even with the way it ended, I know that leaves a very sour taste in our mouths, but it should not be forgotten how special and how good this basketball team actually was at their best.